When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
Welcome to Breaking Silos, a podcast that shines a light on the incredible partnerships happening across campuses every day. I'm your host, Shane Baglini from Muhlenberg College. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing, enrollment management, student affairs, campus leadership, and more. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to Breaking Silos. My guest today is not only one of my favorite people in higher ed, but one of my favorite leaders to talk to in higher ed. Carrie Phillips is Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. Hey, Carrie.
Hi, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Likewise. And so let's dive right in because I think I've heard you talk a lot about leadership, especially, for growing leaders, new leaders. And it's something I want to get into with you. But let's start with how can leaders break silos? It's kind of a theme of this podcast. And one of the kind of sub themes of that is MARCOM leaders having a seat at the table. And so why is that so important in terms of collaboration across campus and breaking silos?
I think it has something to do with this idea that MARCOM teams are uniquely positioned to be a change agent. And what I mean by that is we have relationships by nature of our work with everybody across campus. So 1 minute we're engaged with the history department. The next minute we're working with enrollment to advancement, athletics, and it runs the gamut. And I think because of that, we sometimes can see issues that other people haven't seen yet. And so it gives us a real opportunity to work outside of those silos. A perfect example of that is I was at a prior university and we decided we were going to map the enrollment funnel. This was something our MARCOM team did. We just raised our hand and said, we're going to do this. And what we found is that it crossed 17 offices and 5 divisions. It's like, well, no wonder students are lost and confused. They're getting contradictory information, contradictory timelines. Things don't look alike. They don't go together. But nobody else, because they don't look at the whole picture necessarily, had realized that was a problem. So it gave us the opportunity to be that change agent, to bring everybody around the table and just say, let's just start talking. And then as you start talking and building that relationship, then change kind of happens naturally. So I think that is why it's so important. One of the strategies that I tell my team all the time is let's just focus on 2 degrees. We don't have to move the entire needle today, but every time we do a project, every time we tackle an issue, let's try to move 2 degrees on it. And if we can do that time and time again, we can make a pretty big shift without anybody panicking, without anybody having heartburn, but yet we're moving things in the right direction.
I love that. 2 degrees. I think a lot of times as marketers, we feel overwhelmed depending on the time of year, we feel overwhelmed by the workload. And so those kind of bite-sized movements, I really, really like that. And, this idea of collaboration can be challenging, especially, for all leaders, but especially for new leaders trying to kind of find their footing on campus and in the industry.
Yeah.
Colleges and universities are very complex organizations. So what are some tactics that you've employed or that you've learned over the years to help sort of enhance collaboration from a new leader perspective?
I think one of the things, and this sounds so basic, but get in the room with the folks you're trying to collaborate with. And when I say get in the room, I mean go to them. I think sometimes we want people to come meet with us and it feels like they're getting called to the principal's office. And I don't think that's the spirit of collaboration. I tell our team on several of our partners that we've worked to really build strong collaboration with, We go to them for meetings. We have a regular meeting cadence. We have a shared agenda and a shared note taker. And why that's so important is that, as different people have different thoughts on the process and the agenda and the relationship, they're going to see the things that we talked about and remember things differently. So if we all have a shared starting point and a shared wrap up, then it helps us address those things really quickly. We also try to get to meetings a few minutes early. And again, sounds very elementary, but then that gives you a minute to say, how's your day? How
Yeah.
are the kids? What are the things going on in your world? And all of a sudden, those people become humans and become colleagues. And we, know that Timmy has soccer tryouts, or Susie made the dance team, or they have this big challenge that's happening. So we have contextual awareness of why something we're trying to do maybe isn't happening as
Mhm.
quickly as we'd like. And so I think it's really about finding ways to be intentional, to build that purposefully, but we have to put in the effort as leaders to offer that kind of first olive branch.
Yeah, that's it's something that you might not think of, the idea of showing up a little early, but one of the things that I've found in these conversations on this podcast is that the best relationships across campus are among those who know each other and are friends and consider themselves friends.
Yeah.
And it to build that rapport is so valuable. So again, appreciate that advice. Silos it's a hot button issue in higher ed. I think we've got,
Yeah.
in some instances silos are necessary because too many cooks in the kitchen is can cause issues. But I think it's one of the bigger pain points for folks around our industry.
Mhm.
In your opinion, Carrie, in your experience, why are silos so prevalent in higher ed, and what can MARCOM specifically and MARCOM leaders do to break them down?
Yeah. I think silos go back to organizational structure. And I think they happen because every unit has their own strategic plan, their own goals, visions, things. And those are all really important. And hopefully, those are all mapping up to the university's broader goals and strategic plan. So everybody is doing all these activities. And I think they're all in support of the right goals and objectives. But what I think happens and why silos I think happen sometimes is everybody has all of those. And as dollars become tighter, as resources become further stretched, supporting your thing may mean I have to give up my thing. And so I think that kind of creates silos that exist. They exist in this structure, but then it puts us in a place that they stay because we're trying to each support our own things. And so sometimes there's this, you could get everybody in the same room talking about a bigger objective, then we might be able to realize that there are sometimes that two or three of us are working on something at the same time. Or sometimes it may be that the thing I'm working on, while important and part of my strategic plan, this other thing happening over here is really way more important. And I need to be part of that team. And I don't know that we're the best at having those conversations. But I do think that's part of what MARCOM leaders can really do is look at across the entire landscape of our institutions. What are the things that are going to drive the experience, drive the enrollment, drive the fundraising work? And let's make sure that we're championing those things first so that we're creating an environment that continues to ensure we're successful.
Yeah, that's great. And I think a lot of times marketing is the kind of we're forced to say no sometimes to things, and it can create sort of that automatic kind of, not bad blood, but it could create some tension
Yeah.
across campus because we've really got to be the standard bearers for the institution's priorities. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, Carrie, some methods or strategies that you've employed that have been successful in sort of focusing the work of your team on what is going to impact the institution the most.
Yeah, a great example last week, we had three major projects that all fell into our lap, and they were all those things that I would say are tier one top kinds of projects that are really important. And so I think as leaders, part of our work is we've got to be able to take a temperature on our teams. And so I realized last week those things all had to happen and all had to be successful. So that meant what are other things that our team had on the docket that week that we could say, hey, we can step away from this. And so I think that's part of our role as leaders is within our own teams and the own spheres of influence that we have is being able to say, hey, this thing can wait. We're going to kind of know the political nature of our campus and be able to do that. So I think that's one great way that we can support our teams. I think another thing is we've got to help train our teams and how to, I use this phrase bucket A and bucket B. And so I think we have to sometimes help our teams understand what are the bucket A things that we need to be involved in all the time, and what are the bucket B things that, sometimes it's okay to let go. A perfect example of that, and I pick on the history department all the time. That's always my example. And I don't know why I always go to history. Maybe I'll go to math for now. But let's say the math department is hosting an event on campus for students in 2 nights. Our team might want to help make that look better. But in terms of reality, that's probably bucket B because it's going to be gone in 2 days. But bucket A is something that's going to be happening, that's going to live in a much longer timeline. And so we've got to help train our teams in how, when they can't achieve all the things, how we can help them focus on the things that are going to have the most impact. And then I think the other part of that is we've got to then have that same conversation with our campus colleagues of, you're putting multiple things on us. We're not going to be successful at all of them. What are your bucket A's and your bucket B's, so that we're figuring out where are their priorities, where are our priorities, where's that alignment, and let's really start there. And then finding some other strategies, whether it's, a branded design software or student interns or other ways that we can kind of prioritize and handle some of those other things that don't quite rise to the top.
Yeah. And that's again, great insight. And I think, that leads nicely into my next question, because we talked about marketing being a campus leader, but I want to ask you specifically about why it's so important for marketing to be on cabinet, not just involved in conversations, but be on the cabinet, reporting to the president, being involved in those conversations. Why is that so critically important?
I think MARCOM teams have to be in spaces where they can advocate for the entire experience. And so I've been in multiple different reporting structures over the years. I've seen it. I've been in roles where I haven't been in those spaces. I've been in roles that I've had those great relationships. I have a great relationship with our chancellor now. But I think the reality is the org chart can always look different wherever you are. But I think the important thing is that the MARCOM team has to have a voice in those key decisions. As we talk about marketing, there's product, price, promotion, and place. And historically, marketing teams have only been brought in on promotion. And I think we can have a lot of insights on product. I think we can have a lot of insights on price. And I think we can also be really involved in the place. And so if we just get brought in to promote something, I think we sometimes miss out on opportunity to help shepherd other conversations and discussions. So that can look a lot of different ways how that happens. But I think it's being in those conversations early is really the key focus that's got to be important.
Yeah. And shifting back to new leaders, Carrie, just to follow up on this conversation, I was one of my episodes, a couple episodes back, was with Terry Flannery, who is the kind of the champion for the seat at the table push. And she was mentioning having this, approaching those conversations with this sort of confidence that I am a strategic leader and I can be involved in these conversations in many ways. And so your advice for specifically newer leaders or folks younger in their careers on developing that confidence and really being involved in those conversations in a meaningful way.
I think it's a couple of things. And I think one is that we have to show the value that we add. And I think that's really, really important. I remember a very early networking conversation I had with Terry Flannery, and she was so gracious with her time with me. And I was this young, eager person, and she was this great senior leader. And she asked me follow-up questions in the conversation. She asked what I thought some of the challenges were. She showed me that I had value. And I think that's really important that we do the same when we get into those spaces, is that we show the value of that. I also think it's important that we do a lot of work so that we're prepared to be in those spaces, because we only get one shot in those opportunities. And so I think it's important to think about things like budget and how to do budgeting, how to do strategic planning, how to manage people. Those skills are skills that no one ever teaches you. And so you've got to be able to learn those things so that when you're in those rooms, you're ready to be efficient and effective. I think the worst thing that can happen is you get in there and you don't have those other insights. And so you can't hold your own in the conversation. And a perfect example about learning some of those skills, nobody teaches you those things. Nobody teaches you how to manage a budget, how to manage people. I use this example sometimes, but if you're a fundraiser, and this works beautifully for that example, you are really persistent. You don't take no for an answer, and you can be a little bit bullish at times. Those are qualities that make a fantastic fundraiser. If you're a great fundraiser, then you might become in charge of other great fundraisers. And so all of a sudden, being bullish, not taking no for an answer are the best qualities. And so no one helps us to learn how to make that shift into focused on other things. And so I think that's part of what we have to do if we want to be successful as MARCOM leaders, is figure out how we train that next generation in some of those things so that when those opportunities come, people are ready to step into those roles.
Yeah. Great. It's a great example on being sort of tactically excellent and then needing to manage people who are also tactically excellent. And those two things are very different. And so that's a great example.
Absolutely. And it's a place that I failed at, quite frankly. I was not the best at managing people when I first started. I certainly didn't understand the budget. I'll say it now, but I got myself 5 figures over budget the first time I was in charge of the numbers because I didn't quite understand it all. And thankfully, I had a team that we were able to really buckle down and get ourselves out of that. But that was a pure leadership mistake on my end. And I think it's something that I've internalized that we need to be better at as a profession, is helping that next generation.
Yeah, I would say that one of the more underrated relationships for marketers is the CFO. For young leaders, just be able to have a conversation with your CFO, and you'll be surprised. Yeah. You'll be surprised at how much you can benefit from that in the long run.
CFO, our procurement directors are so important. Every institution, especially if you're in state, has a very particular procurement process, and understanding the rules. The contracts team, we have great folks in those spaces on our campus, and it's all the time that we're calling each other, help me understand this, help me nuance this. And having, again, those relationships is critical.
Yeah. Having a good relationship with the folks that allow you to spend money is a good thing as a marketer.
But how many times have you heard, I'm a marketer, I don't do money, I don't do numbers? Like, we've all heard that, and we've all got to, I've said it myself. And so we've got to be better at that.
Yeah. Agreed. And so I want to shift gears here to some of the work that you're doing, Carrie, with Enrollify. But before I do that, I want to remind our listeners to rate, subscribe, review this podcast and every Enrollify podcast to help us grow the network. And hopefully you all are enjoying what we're doing. And speaking of Enrollify, Carrie, I think that you're the newest Enrollify creator as of this conversation. I know we're adding more and more every day. So you're hosting the Lessons in Leadership podcast. You also hosted the Lessons in Leadership course here on Enrollify.
Yes.
So first and foremost, give us a breakdown of both of those and how folks can get involved in both.
Yeah. So the Lessons in Leadership course, it is a course that runs over several weeks. We've got multiple leadership lessons, one of those a week. We're offering that, planning to a cohort version in the spring, but you can also do that on demand. And so you take those, and it's very much one of those things that we cover key principles that every leadership needs to know related to theory. So situational leadership, servant leadership, conflict styles, crucial conversations. And so we talk through each of those, give you some assessments and some tools to really rate your own work on that and help everyone improve. And so that has been a real fun experience. I did several leadership courses based on leadership theory. And so it's really been fun to get back into that world and to really dig deep into some of those theories, because I think a lot of times as young leaders, we don't always have the best tools in our toolbox. Again, no one teaches you how to do that. And so my hope is that this course will allow folks to expand their tools so that when they're faced with a challenge, they can use conflict styles or situational leadership, servant leadership to figure out how to approach it. So there's that piece. And then there is this Lessons in Leadership playlist. And so what we are doing is once a month publishing a playlist of bite-size or snack-size pieces of content on a particular leadership topic. So the very first one was failures. And so we had multiple leaders very quickly tell us about how they have embraced failure as a leader. We've got several other great topics coming out. Handling criticism is going to be one, managing uncertainty, something all leaders have to navigate at some point. And so really excited about that as a way to give people quick, actionable tips and insights to help make their leadership journey something of value. We're doing this a little bit different in that we're releasing that as a playlist all at once. I think very Netflix binge worthy. Yeah. Each of those is about 3 minutes. So within your lunch break, you can get through all of them and hopefully really get some action insights.
I love that. That's great. I've been a little bit busy, as you know. I had had a new child come before, but it's on my list of things to do. So for me, the shortness of that is great, and the bite-sized nature. So getting to know you, Carrie, and following you on LinkedIn and things like that, you're somebody that's very passionate about developing leaders. As we just heard, you're really involved in that here with Enrollify. I would argue that higher ed has a lot of room for improvement in developing leaders.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that we can do that? What are some training and resources and opportunities that we can provide new leaders to help us, help grow that sort of next generation?
I think it goes back to some basics, making sure that people understand how to manage people. One of the things I'm really, really proud of is UA Little Rock hired 40 new faculty members this year.
Wow.
And we also have a faculty leadership academy that we launched this year to help those faculty members make that transition to campus, but to also help rising leaders make that transition from the classroom or academia into leadership and administrative roles. I think we need more programs like that, training our own bench of leaders and building that internal capacity. I think that's a great thing. I also think we need to do a better job at explaining how we budget. Are we using zero-based budgeting? Are we taking what we did last year and just looking at adjustment? Are we tying our budget specifically to certain outcomes and activity-based budgeting? There's so many different ways that we can approach this. And often somebody gets tossed into a role, they don't really get that. And I think that's an opportunity. I think another thing is really looking at how we onboard with HR. HR is such an important part of our work. One of the things that I get to do every single month is I go to HR orientation, and they laugh at me because I bring goodie bags and I am so excited. But these are the people that are going to be our ambassadors out in our community. And I think as MARCOM leaders, we have to do a really good job of building that HR relationship so that we can be involved in that orientation, making sure our new faculty, our new staff members know what's happening. And I think that also helps us then build that groundswell up so that we can approach that from a lot of different ways. That also is really important for rising leaders to think about. So I think there are lots of ways that we can think about this and do this, but I think it's going to take intentional insight. We had a great generation of MARCOM leaders ahead of us. Many of those folks are looking at retirement. And I think you and I are in the generation that hoping to, step into those big shoes to fill, that it's also on us to turn around behind us and pull a few folks along with us and find those opportunities for them.
Definitely. And so as we close out here, Carrie, I'm interested to know, you mentioned the Lessons in Leadership playlist upcoming about failures.
Yeah.
So I'm not asking about, well, you can tell us a failure that you might have experienced, but in general, some things that you might have done differently when you first became a leader, knowing what you know now.
Yeah. So my failure was the budget. And so I've already told you one.
Yeah.
So you already got one. You're not getting two. But I would say three things. One is monkeys. I came from a member of the team to then being in charge of the team. And that's a really hard transition to make. And I wanted so much to be a friend that I would take everybody's monkeys. And so people would say things like, oh, I'm not quite sure how to do this thing. And I would say, well, don't worry about it. I'll do it. So then we had a monkey rifling through the papers on my desk. And then another person on the team would come in and say, well, I emailed them and they didn't respond. And I'd say, that's okay. I'll reach out. So then I had a monkey swinging from the light fixture. And that happened all day, every day. So I had monkeys everywhere. And what that meant is that I was chasing everybody's monkeys all day. And so I was exhausted. And then I would have to go home at night and try to do all the things I didn't do during the day. So that meant my team then got a bajillion emails at night. They felt like they had pressure to check those. So it created this really bad environment. And I figured it out. We got it figured out. And so I had to learn how to say no to monkeys. And so instead of, you don't know how to do that, it was instead of me taking that, I had to turn it and say, well, I'm sorry, let's figure that out together. Your next one-on-one is tomorrow. Why don't you bring this and we'll workshop it together? Bring your first draft and we'll look at it. Or, oh, they haven't responded. Well, have you called them? Have you walked over? I had to find ways to hand those monkeys back. So I think that's one thing I would do differently. That tying in with that is, I think it's really important to model the culture and the behavior that you want for your team. If you want them to do specific things, I think it's really important that you model that for them. And so I think that's something I didn't necessarily take into account. And then I would say the final thing is create a culture where the best ideas come through. It was in the pandemic, we had this great idea that somebody came across. And I remember going home that evening and telling my husband how great this idea was and that we were going to run with it and how amazing it was. And I was playing a support role. And I felt like I failed as a team member. And he said, no, I would actually argue that you're a better team member because you let the best idea win. And I think that was a moment that I got comfortable in my leadership, that I didn't have to always have the right answer. I just needed to create a culture where people felt safe to share their good ideas. And so I wish I could have gotten to that a little bit sooner.
Yeah, the chasing the monkeys, that's great. Can I ask where the monkey came from?
Yeah, I have no idea where I got that phrase, but it just works and people get what I'm talking about.
You're
and
right.
So I've just stuck with the monkeys.
I love it. No, it's great advice. And you're right. Yes, going from team member to team leaders, it can be really challenging. But yeah, I mean, I would say I would agree that my biggest challenge as a new leader when I first started managing people was trying to be everything for everybody at all times. And it's exhausting, no matter what size team you have. And so, you've got to take care of yourself first. It reminds me of the kind of the airplane analogy. Secure your own oxygen mask before you help others.
Yes. What a great point. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So great advice for new leaders. And thanks, Carrie, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I encourage all of our listeners to look into the Lessons for in Leadership course, the playlist, the bingeable playlist on Enrollify. I love that. And, feel free to reach out to Carrie. Her LinkedIn is in the show notes below. I mentioned she's one of my favorite people in the industry, and I so appreciate your time and your insights here today, Carrie.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, and have a great day, everyone.
Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your host. Learn from Dave Cabilds, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and many more of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.